what exactly do you mean by that?
The Republican Party as a whole somewhat changing beliefs.
Hey guys, what's up? It's Forward Feature here on a special episode, and we have a special guest, Audio Job, breaking it down with you. Claps.
Hi.
So, and obviously we have me, Eric, Arjun, and Jack. So today we're mostly going to be talking about basically things surrounding the upcoming presidential election, including Kamala Harris, and who our favorite Democratic nominees were. All right, so let's just start with Kamala Harris. What do you guys think about her?
Adia, since you're the guest, do you want to go first?
Sure. So, I think she's a pretty polarizing candidate, especially on the left. And I think personally Joe Biden could have definitely chosen another more uniting candidate for the left, because she definitely has a spotty record with criminal justice as a prosecutor in California. But also, like, as an Asian American woman, I think it's amazing to see another fellow Asian American woman on the ticket. And she's also, she really brings the diversity points, if that makes sense. But I think that I really don't stand with all the marijuana-related incarcerations under her and the way she aggressively targeted Black men during her career.
I think I'm gonna have to actually disagree with you there, Audrey. I actually think it's a genius pick, in that I think that there's not a lot of people on the left who are undecided. I think most of them are already voting for Biden because Trump is so polarizing. I think that it was genius of Biden to go with a more moderate, right-leaning candidate, because that's where he needs to get the swing voters there. I don't think there's a lot of people on the left who are undecided. I think if you can grab some swing voters and people can vote for Biden, because I know that Harris is not a radical leftist.
Yeah, she's more center, so he definitely gets the swing voters. But for people on the further left, it's definitely more polarizing.
So my thing with Kamala Harris is that she's confusing because she switched back and forth in her positions a lot of times. Like, she used to be for Bernie's Medicare, now she said she's not comfortable with it. And then in terms of like being an Indian American, I that's really cool. But see, the funny thing is, like, she was sworn in as an Indian American senator, but now when Joe Biden, he says he's going to pick a woman, and then he's under pressure to pick a Black woman, she starts identifying as Black. And I don't think so. His main course of attack has been phony Kamala, and Kamala. I know you said that she was polarizing and that she would help center voters, but as far as I'm seeing, that's not really happening, because a lot of polls are just showing that people are not very happy with Kamala.
Yeah, I think in general, like, just like having like a woman of color like being on the ticket is really good for, communities of color, but also women, right? But I feel like in some ways it's like, I feel like, because Biden literally just said he was going to pick a woman of color, and I think that just like really restricted him. And in some ways, like, maybe he was like kind of like cornered himself in a way, like, so that he just kind of restricted himself. I think he should have like kept it open, like anyone who's really good enough should like be in consideration. So because I was thinking, personally, maybe like Andrew Yang would have been a good fit, but that's for later. But I think also the vice president is like overhyped in some ways, because I was reading like something about on like the White House government, and basically she doesn't have any power except for when like she needs to take control of the presidency if like Joe Biden dies or something, or if like there's a tie in the Senate, which really rarely happens. So I feel like it's good symbolism, but I feel like she doesn't really have a big impact on the presidency in general.
Well, I think what's different with Kamala and other vice presidents is that, well, first of all, Joe Biden, he used to be a classic liberal. He used to be just your average, run-of-the-mill liberal in Senate. But now, he's had to go along with the more leftist wing of the party. So I think he could really bend to his vice president, and to take into fact that Joe Biden is really old. Like, if he wins, he will be like probably the oldest president ever sworn in. And there is a high probability that Kamala will become the president during Joe's term. the 25th Amendment, I think, would have to be put into action. So people should take this one seriously.
I also think that as vice president, even if something doesn't happen to Joe in his term, it definitely is setting her up for a 2024 run that could potentially be successful.
All right. So talking about 2024, assuming that all the Democrats from this year who ran are going to run again, who do you think who in 2024 who would be your favorite presidential candidate?
I mean, for me, it would definitely be Andrew Yang and Tulsi Gabbard. They're the dynamic duo. You know, they are someone that could definitely appeal to both conservatives and leftists. So they would definitely have, I mean, a great ticket.
If he's still alive, I'd love to see Michael Bloomberg. I think he was the best out of the bunch. But if not, then maybe Buttigieg. I think Andrew Yang is not the way to go. I don't agree with a lot of things he has to say. I think he's way too idealistic. He doesn't have a lot of experience as a politician. Oh.
Well, I think that I'm a lot further left than most of you guys, but I like Andrew Yang, of course, but I also would vote for Bernie if election day was today.
I think Jack. Yeah.
No, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
So I think Jack made a good point about Mayor Bloomberg. I feel like if he ran against Trump, he would probably have like the highest probability to win, because like there were like things like he really controlled Trump when Trump was in New York, and like he really like, I guess, enforced laws upon Trump and didn't let Trump get away with anything sly or something. So I think like Trump might have like a fear factor for him. And also, again, Bloomberg is a billionaire, so I guess that might appeal to some people in some ways. And it would be like, although it would be kind of like, I guess, bad for diversity because it's two rich old white men, but I feel like he would really have the highest chance against Trump.
Well, the problem that we're seeing these days is that we're getting candidates that people don't like because they're them, but because they're better than the incumbents or they're better than the others. A recent Gallup poll found that 56% of Joe Biden voters are voting, or supporters support him because he's better than Trump. That's a concerning statistic. You know, we shouldn't have to get to a point where people are supporting someone not because of who they are, but because they're better than somebody else. That's a pretty low point. The thing with Bernie is that if he does run against, I don't know, Joe Biden in 2024, people will like him. I don't know how Joe Biden will do as a president. We made a post about this, but certainly he will be less polarizing. America might be more united, or at least less of a mess than it is now.
Yeah, so actually,
here you can speak.
Right. So I think we had a good point about Andrew Yang. So Jack was talking about how Andrew Yang was really idealistic. Can you like further explain that?
Yeah, hold up. I'm unmuted. Right, there we go.
Yeah.
I just don't think that he has a real idea of how to work within the political system. I think that a lot of his policies, I don't agree with a lot of them, but he just has no experience as putting them into work. And I think that we've seen pretty well over the past 4 years what happens when we have people who haven't been involved in the political system before. I mean, the only other people since 1920 who have been in office and who have been president and have not held significant office beforehand were Dwight Eisenhower, who was the most powerful general at the time in World War II, and then Trump. And we saw how Trump ended up. So I think that he's just not, I don't think he has experience enough yet to figure out how to work within the political system, because it's one thing to put out all these good ideas, and it's another thing to realize that not all of them are achievable.
So if you were to support a candidate, would they ideally, I mean, Bloomberg isn't So how would you say someone should have some sort of position like mayor or Senate or Congress first?
Yeah, I just think I'm a little bit my point more was less about specifically that he needs to hold office beforehand. My point was more that I don't think I think that he has some ideas that are a little bit radical or would create a lot of change. And I just think that he doesn't understand that that's not how politics really works. I think that you need tons and tons of support, and there's all kinds of political gaming that needs to take place, and he has no exposure to that.
Well,
And
what would you guys?
I also think that his base is almost fake. I think that a lot of people like him because he's like the smart guy candidate, and that everyone thinks that you go to him because you want to sound smart because it's not a typical candidate and how it's so progressive and radical. And I just don't think that's true.
Well, I wouldn't say Andrew Yang is radical because he's got a lot of things to back up what he says. But what would you guys say are the most disastrous aspects of the Trump presidency so far?
Oh, something I think is atrocious is like the 170,000 deaths because of coronavirus. I mean, yes, even if Trump had handled it better, there still would have been people dead, but I feel like if he had handled it better, there would have been less people dead.
Yeah, yes.
Like wearing a mask.
I think
not
that's
encouraging the use of hydroxychloroquine.
I think that's one of the weaker points that can be made. Well, I definitely agree that he should have done better. I think that it's very difficult to tell how it would have played out. It's just completely hypothetical. I think the biggest issue is one of the most senior generals in the U.S. military said that Trump is the first he's now retired, is the first president he's ever seen who has tried to divide America, not unite them. And the military has a long history of not being involved in politics and not speaking out. And I think that it's really telling that a guy of his position would go and say that, and it really speaks to the magnitude of division and anger and fear that Trump is trying to sow into the American people for political gain.
I also think that another atrocious part of Trump's presidency that he was impeached for is that asking a foreign country to look into your opponent's son is just not okay, and I think that was an impeachable offense.
So, I mean, he was impeached. Should he be removed from office?
I mean, the Senate didn't pass the articles of impeachment.
But if they did, should he be removed from office?
At this point, I'm really not sure because it's all hypothetical, but I feel like that is an impeachable offense. I don't think that big that he should be removed from office, but the Senate didn't pass the articles of impeachment. So
wait,
yeah.
Can you expound on that a little bit more? You said that it is an impeachable offense, but not something that needs to be removed from office. And if something is an impeachable offense, you would figure that it would also merit removing from office. So how does that? I think there's a logical fallacy there. Can you elaborate?
Yeah, you're right. I think that it would he should be removed from office. Because that is an impeachable offense, and asking a foreign country to look into your opponent's son so you can do better in the election. Yeah, he should be removed from office. I misspoke earlier on.
I think that we would need to see some more testimonies, which we didn't see in the Senate.
Yeah,
and
because
I do think that we need to be very careful about impeaching presidents or removing presidents from office, because it sets a very poor precedent, because the next time your buddy Yang's in office and Republicans control the Congress or continue to control the Congress, then they could come up with something to impeach him. So I think we need to be very careful as a country about
how we
use the
impeaching.
Yeah, how we use the balancing of power that is given to us and granted to us.
Yeah, you're right.
So moving on, I guess, to a new subject in terms of we're going to talk about economic reform, I guess. So a new trend we're seeing in especially people like Bernie and AOC are people who recognize themselves as democratic socialists, or in some cases, just socialists. Michael Bloomberg actually called out Bernie in one of the debates so Bernie was talking about, and Michael Bloomberg was like, we had something like that. It was called communism and it didn't work out. And obviously people are very upset, but do you think democratic socialism is the right way to go? I know you voted yay on one of our polls for socialism. So how would you say it stacks up against capitalism?
Well, socialism is an imperfect alternative to capitalism. And I don't like socialism does not always equal communism. So none of these alternatives are perfect, but I definitely think that we have to start giving less power to the rich and give more power to the people in our system. So I don't think like socialism is the way to go, but like it's definitely better than capitalism, which just divides the people.
So
Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Because I think that America is as close to a pure democracy as we can get. I mean, you can talk about the Electoral College, but how would you define giving more power to the people?
So how would you describe the role of the rich in America?
Yeah, but more, you mentioned how the rich have too much control and how power should be given to the people. Can you just elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, we have so much income inequality, and I think definitely more laws have to be put in place, more tax cuts for the middle class and more taxes on the rich. And I think that like there's so many changes we have to make in our system to give more power to the people than to the rich, because the top 1% hold all the power. Like Michael Bloomberg, why is a billionaire? Why should a billionaire be president when the majority of people, when 99% of the population, when 99.99% of the population is not even like close to being a billionaire?
Well, I
Like,
just don't understand, why is that a disqualifying factor?
because we should have a person who represents us in office.
And are there any candidates you would think would represent them better than Bloomberg?
Well, yeah, I think Andrew Yang could represent them better. I think Bernie could
he's
represent
top
them better.
1%.
Well, he's not a billionaire, but Bernie could represent them better. I just think that billionaires should not exist.
So when you say top
Hold
1%,
on. I'm sorry. Let me just say something there. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to bash you. I'm sorry if I'm going in a little bit too deep here. Billionaires should not exist. Do you mean that people should not be allowed to accumulate that much wealth? Is that the point?
Yes,
But
because most of the time billionaires become billionaires either from inheriting the wealth or exploiting the people.
Okay, so Michael, I am very passionate about Michael Bloomberg. He's one of my favorite candidates, so I know a lot about him. He was actually raised poor.
Yeah.
And he worked his way up, and he's created over, I think it was 25,000 jobs, maybe somewhere in that range. So helping out the economy, and he just sells information. So his company, what it does is, I don't know if you're familiar with it, they create the Bloomberg terminal, which is a way of getting information about the market and putting it into a digital format. And he doesn't actually make the thing; he just has a bunch of people program it. So it's all digital work. So like, as opposed to an Apple who uses workers in, I don't even know, Taiwan, who are underpaid and exploited to make their phones, a guy like Bloomberg made all his wealth with making high-paying jobs. So do you think that that's exploitation and/or inheritance?
Well, not necessarily, but I don't know very much about Bloomberg's practices.
That's
but
fair.
I think that a billionaire should not represent the American people, even if he was born poor, because a billionaire we don't see ourselves in a billionaire. The people do not see themselves in a billionaire. The majority of people are not billionaires.
True. That's a very good point.
do you think
how would you go about? I'm sorry, Arjun, I'm gonna let you talk after this one. How would you go about making it to be so that candidates represent the American people more? Is there systemic change that needs to take place in the political system? And if so,
I mean,
and again, I know you might not have thought this all through, and this is a very complex question, but I'm kind of just picking your brain on this one.
Anyone can run, and I don't think you can like bar billionaires from running. And at the end, it's the people's choice who they want to vote. And there's a reason that Michael Bloomberg dropped out of the race, because the majority of people did not see themselves in him.
The people did choose President Donald Trump.
Well, yes, he is a billionaire. And I think the majority of the left, the people who are actually voting in the Democratic primaries, did not see themselves in him.
So when
Donald Trump is the right. In the left, billionaires are a bigger issue, and wealth income inequality is a bigger issue.
So when you say the rich, do you define that as top 10%, 5%, 1%?
I'm talking about like the top 1%, like millionaires, billionaires.
And you don't think they pay their fair share?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Do you think they pay their fair share?
I think many billionaires do not pay their fair share, and many billionaires do not pay taxes.
Well,
So, sorry.
billionaires only make up like very small percentage of the population.
Yes, but
they
why
pay.
do
They
they
pay.
have more wealth than the bottom percent of the population? And like
Because
it's a large
because
They
percent. I don't have
do.
the
They
vote.
do
they
pay.
came up with
They
an
they only
ideal
make
way
up.
to
They
make
make
that
up. They make up like 0.1% of the population, but they pay 47% of taxes.
But
exactly.
they have
That's-
more
Top
wealth,
1% pays the top 1% pays 39% of all taxes. It was in the New
but
York
they don't pay enough.
So the top 1%
billionaires.
make up
They
more
make up.
than 40%. So they should be
Sorry,
more than
repeat the
40
question?
So okay, so billionaires represent less than 1% of the population, but they pay 40. The statistic I'm getting is 47% of taxes, all
Yeah.
taxes, and that's not their fair
But
share.
many of them still do not pay enough taxes. And if they paid more taxes, we could definitely fund like universal pre-K and health childcare and more going towards healthcare. I think they should definitely pay more because they pay the bare minimum that they have to pay, but they have so much wealth. Like no one should be allowed to accumulate that much wealth because the majority of time, I don't know about Michael Bloomberg, but the majority of the time, like Jeff Bezos, the Koch brothers, they all have gotten their wealth by exploiting people.
So exploiting.
Eric, you want to
Exploiting. How do you define
Exploiting their
exploiting?
workers, exploiting a monopoly.
So I understand exploitation, but working is a work by choice, right? You make a choice to actively work and you can leave when you want. How would you define exploitation?
When you say
Exploitation.
you make a choice to work, who are you referring to?
I say if you want to work for Amazon, you make a choice to work for Amazon. You look at their wages, you sign the contract. If you don't like it, you can leave at any time. So
Yes, but that doesn't, first of all, I think that's a very privileged standpoint because Amazon does pay workers more than other companies like McDonald's, for example, but they still make their workers pee in bottles. It's not
so
great working conditions.
I
And I think
actually have a question
you
for you.
can leave is a very privileged
I actually have a
standpoint.
question for you.
but you can leave, right?
Wait, hold up. Do
You
you know
just said
anyone?
you can leave if you don't like it.
Well, he did
Yeah.
say that. And Arjun, I do want to say that I don't think that's entirely fair to say. I'm going to have to agree with Aja on this one, because it's a little bit. It's not entirely fair to say you can just leave because that might be the best job available. And then I want to turn to Aja. And I have a question for you. Do you personally know anyone who works at Amazon?
Yeah.
In like a factory? Yeah.
Yeah, my friend's dad.
Cool. All right. I was just wondering. And does he say stuff like that they do have to pee in bottles and stuff like that?
No, but I haven't ever talked to him about his job.
Oh, that's fair. That's fair.
There are definitely stories about workers who have had to pee in bottles. So while he hasn't ever talked to me about his job, whether or not he has to pee in a bottle, I know that there have been stories of workers who haven't been given enough breaks that they have to pee in bottles.
So I just want to go back on my comment. So when I said you can leave, obviously that sounded privileged, but what I meant was obviously, that may be your only job. But my thing is that, you are not, I don't believe Amazon is okay, so I understand the stories of like people peeing in bottles and stuff, but that's like one story. You can't let one story, or multiple maybe, but not a majority, unless you have a majority of obviously workers polling and saying that.
Many workers claim that they're overworked, many of them.
What percentage?
I don't have an exact percentage, but there are many stories coming out that workers have been overworked. And peeing in bottle, that's just a specific circumstance. But many of them say that they're overworked and they don't have enough breaks.
Well, until we can get it, there's a difference between stories and percentages. I think the problem with media today is that we take stories to represent.
It's all very biased. Yeah.
And of course, though, if there is an overworked percentage, then maybe that should be of concern. But I don't think overworked amounts to exploitation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, here's the thing.
Well, when I was saying exploitation, I was also talking about exploitation of a monopoly, which Amazon does, not just exploitation of the workers.
Well, look, here's the thing. Jeff Bezos doesn't go and make these conditions for his workers. It's the local distribution center. It's the local factory under local management. So I don't think it's...
But what is Amazon as a whole trying to do to fix it?
Again, I'm going to agree.
And Jeff Bezos is just making money off of this exploitation. So at the end, a lot of the money is going to him.
So I actually do agree with Aja there. I think that it's a little bit unfair to say that I think that if he recognized that this was an issue, and I'm not saying whether or not it really is an issue, because I
agree.
Don't think I have enough information to make that decision other than random postings of teenage people on Instagram. if it was an issue, then it would be something that Bezos needed to address. I think that he has enough power in his position to address that and make it clear that that's not what Amazon stands for.
But also, the money is going to him, and it's not. And at the end of the day, he has grown so much wealthier during this pandemic, and so at the end of the day, even if he's not making these decisions himself, a lot of the money and all the work these workers are doing is going to him.
And do you think that it's unfair? If we take this a step forward, do you think that it's unfair for the people at the top to profit off the work of the bottom? Do you think that they should own a bigger share in the means of production per se?
Well, yeah, I think Amazon should definitely.
So if you said yes, then that would be like socialism, right? That would be the workers collectively owning the means of production.
But not completely. I think that, yeah, he should still, because he's the founder of Amazon, he's cultivated this business since the 90s. I don't think that the workers should have the entire share. At the same time, I don't think Bezos should be getting money off of exploiting these workers.
So would a good solution to this be that that instead of going to socialism and with the systemic change or democratic socialism, whatever you want to call it, we just improve working conditions?
No, I think that, well, yes, improving working conditions is a first step, but I think that you definitely have to give more power to the workers, which is.
What would that in a perfect world, that you're the president and Congress doesn't exist, and you can just write a law into effect. How would you go about combating this? Would you create increase minimum wage? How would you go about combating that?
Do you give workers stock options?
Yeah.
That's already given.
Also, increasing minimum wage. Minimum wage is a lot of times workers aren't paid a living wage. Not in Amazon, but many other places, workers aren't paid a living wage.
Like which companies?
I don't have specific companies, but there are many places, many small businesses, many companies where workers are not paid a living wage.
That's true. We do need to address that. Think about the buying power of minimum wage and how does that allow for a good living?
I think how much should be raised
comes in.
What's up?
I think that's where the freedom dividend comes in. Like what Andrew Yang said, maybe it's not that you have to directly take all these small businesses money and then say you have to give at least this amount to someone. You say here, just for being human, you get this amount, so that by having this and working, you can sustain a happy life and fulfilling.
I'd actually love to talk about the universal basic income. I was actually reading a lot about it over the past few days. And I would have to say that I think that it's an awful idea. I think that I don't understand why someone should get $1,000 just for existing. That's not how it works. The way the government is constructed is that government provides certain freedom or certain services, Social Security, protection from China. You can go on and on about them. Why? One of the rules of government is not just to give you money. And I think that there are certain people in society who cannot be expected to function on their own, be it that they're too young or a single mother supporting 7 children or people who are disabled. And to those people, they can't function properly in a true capitalist society. They just can't do it. So to those people, there should be certain services provided, but why should everyone get a universal basic income, even if they're not doing any work? And maybe the answer to combating those people who can't survive and can't function properly in a society is to increase services for them and maybe expand homeless funding.
I mean, UBI should not go to every single person, I don't think.
I think it should only go to eligible families.
Yes, Andrew Yang defines UBI as capitalism that doesn't start at zero. But obviously that means that it should only go to eligible families. One thing I wanted to circle back to was on the topic of billionaires. So the problem with if you do raise taxes on billionaires, why would there be an incentive? It's been shown that incentive to take risks and create a business would be lowered, and thus not creating as many jobs. Right. So why would we raise taxes? on businesses, like corporate taxes?
You're talking to me?
I mean, if you want to answer, sure.
Um, well, I think that I didn't really get your question, but I think if you're talking about like billionaires, not actually, can you repeat your question?
Yeah, so raising taxes on corporations and billionaires has been showed to create that billionaires feel less comfortable, and business owners in general, not just billionaires, feel less comfortable taking business risks, such as opening a new location, for example, and thus creating less jobs than would have under a lower tax system. So why would we raise taxes? Wouldn't that lower the business incentive?
And also, wouldn't billionaires literally just leave the country?
Yeah, the one thing that I think about that is that first off, nobody's leaving America. It's the best country in the
Yeah.
world. Nobody's like just going to take their whole company and move it to Tokyo or wherever. There's a reason why these people are coming to America. There's a reason why America is, as our great president Ronald Reagan once said, the shining city on a hill. There's a reason for that. So they're not just going to take up and leave. But we do need to be careful about the taxes we level on corporations and billionaires. And I think that companies of the magnitude that Aja was talking about aren't going to necessarily be discouraged in taking new risks because of taxes. I think that they already pay. Amazon's a little bit different, but they already pay taxes. And I don't think that increasing them will have a significant enough impact on it. Again, it depends on how much you raise it.
So would you say capitalism is immoral?
Not at all. I think that capitalism, as Winston, quoting a lot of people here, Winston Churchill once said, capitalism is the best worst system. There's no good system out there, and capitalism is the best out of them.
Yeah, so here's the argument I'm hearing a lot from the left. Like people like AOC have said, on her wing have said that capitalism is immoral. And the problem I have with that is socialism isn't moral either. I think it's less moral because it makes government the biggest force in people's lives. And you're taking away the thing with when you get these big taxes, you're taking away from somebody something that they have earned. What's more moral than taking someone's things away, right?
I mean, I think that we're searching for a perfect system, but
We're
no
not going to
system
find one.
is really perfect. And capitalism isn't perfect, socialism isn't perfect, communism is definitely not perfect. I don't think we will ever have like a perfect system, one that is completely moral, because we're not living in like an ideal world.
Yeah, so the problem I'm seeing is people on the right are voting for equality of opportunity. People on the left are vouching for equality of outcome. Which do you think that you would personally support?
Equality of outcome, because I think
Really? Sorry, go ahead.
I don't think that like communism is the way to go, but I think that like we should have less inequality in our system, like whether it be like economic, racial, gender.
Eric,
I think what? I didn't hear you.
Sorry, Eric, what do you think? Equality of outcome or equality of opportunity?
I mean,
I think Arjun and I are pretty
like
are
the
agreed.
way Adia said it, it kind of made her seem like a communist, but like I understand like she's not saying that exactly. It's just like we should have less inequality, not just like pure inequality.
Yeah, I don't think like everything should be equal, because that is communism, and communism is not a perfect system, and most of the time it gives the government way too much power and takes the power away from the people and robs them of their voices. But I think that we should have less inequality, if that makes sense.
I think I agree with that. I think that we do want to strive for, if we could create equality of opportunity, then I think there would be no need for more measured. If we could create true equality of opportunity, then we should not go about trying to achieve the equality of outcome. I think that if we strive to become a true equitable society is not everyone ending up in the same place, but everyone starting in the same place, because we should allow for people who are harder workers, or people who are smarter, or people who are going to figure out ways to better society, in doing so, help out themselves and from a monetary standpoint, then it shouldn't matter if females are making more than males, or that shouldn't matter, because if everyone truly starts from the same point, then there's no reason to create any level setting. But that it's true that we don't have that right now. There is not equality of opportunity in America, and there probably never will be. If under
Yeah, to put it
not
in an
really achievable, it's more of an ideal idea than anything else. So I agree with Adja that there is probably a way to go that we can try to help level set the equality of opportunity. But I don't think equality of outcome is, I think it's really fun. I think it's false.
I think the government's role, if you were to, I guess, imagine as a playing field, would to make sure the playing field was level, but the job wouldn't be to push everyone across the playing field, but rather just make sure everyone can get across. Right.
Yeah, so there's an incentive.
Yeah, pretty much.
And actually, you could go.
No, it's fine.
All
Go
right,
ahead.
actually talking about like equality and everything, what are your guys' standpoints on affirmative action?
Adia, you want to go?
Well, I've always been really torn about affirmative action because I'm really one of those minorities that is not benefited by affirmative action, but at the same time I completely understand the motivation behind affirmative action, because we definitely need affirmative action is not about putting one group in front of another. It's about leveling the playing field, if that makes sense, like what we were talking about earlier. So I've always been a little torn on that subject, and I haven't really developed a strong standpoint on it. But for now, I think that affirmative action should be put in place, because it's not, like I said before, not about putting someone in front. It's about leveling the playing field and putting all minorities on the same. But it definitely does not mean that Asians should be put back because of their race, because I think that race should not definitely play the first factor in admissions.
Yeah, so I think I actually agree with Aja here, and I think that affirmative action should be used. I think that you might want to come up with a different name for it. I think that people try to focus on specific things about it without seeing the big picture. With the big picture is that there are some people in society who don't start at the same time as everyone else or in a race, meaning that certain parts of their lives have been incredibly more difficult than others, be it that they're from an inner city and they go to inner city schools, and there's all kinds of different outcomes. Maybe they grew up with a single mother, and we should be actively looking to help those people out, and colleges want to help those people out and to provide them with this equality of opportunity that we're talking about and that we're trying to achieve. And then I think the other thing that people forget about affirmative action that's not affirmative action is, if you're a college or a business or wherever, prep school, whatever, it doesn't make sense to have people, all white people or all Asian people or all Black people or all Hispanic people. They're looking to create a class of diverse people. So even if there was no affirmative action, they're not always going to choose the most qualified applicants, because they want to build a class where people will go there and they can be exposed to people of different nationalities and different ideas and different practices. In the same way that all their athletes aren't going to be football players, all their students are probably not. They don't want all their students to be the same race or the same income or have the same interests.
The idea of affirmative action sounds great, and it is about leveling the playing field, and it's not meant to put one racial group ahead of another, but unfortunately that is what it does. That's exactly what it does. And I don't think affirmative action I don't think race should play a factor in admissions, because why isn't it based off of merit? These are supposed to be places of higher education, not diversity. And when you get into a system like affirmative action, there's no way to do it without putting one racial group ahead of another. For example, if you had a lower class Asian and you had an upper class African American, the affirmative action would still help the African American while hurting the Asian. It doesn't make any sense there. I think admission should be based off of the merit, how smart someone is, how well-rounded they are, not their race.
So I would like to address that. And I think that the notion that white people and Asian people are being discriminated against college admissions, while on a specific basis, may or may not be true, in that race may be a factor to it. I think that if you look at it, white people make up of Ivy League schools. White people make up a higher percentage of Ivy League schools than they are of society, and of Asian people make up 10 times as much Ivy Leagues as they make up America as a whole. So I don't think that as a whole there's discrimination there, because the numbers speak for themselves. And African Americans make up 7% of Ivy League schools, while accounting for 13.4% of the population. So there's clearly something there, and the schools wanting to be reflective of American demographics makes a whole lot of sense to me.
Well,
Because as I said, they're not only looking for the most qualified applicants, but, and when I say schools, I can also talk about jobs here. They want to have
why aren't they looking for the most qualified applicants? That's
so I explained that earlier. So why would you want to go to, you're going to a school, right?
Yeah.
And say it's really easy. Say you're an athlete, right?
Yeah.
You wouldn't want a school that's all football players, all the best football players. You want hockey players, you want tennis players, you want basketball players. In the same way that if you're going to a school, you don't want all white people or all Asian people or all black people or all Hispanic people.
That's
You
racist.
What?
No, it's not. I don't think it is.
Why?
I think he's saying that you want diversity in the school you're going to.
Exactly. You want to have diverse groups so you can meet people of different interests and nationalities and ethnicities, and you want to have a really well-rounded body.
Like, I think what he's really trying to say is that you wouldn't want to go to a school where you're not where you're not welcome, or where you don't feel like you belong.
That's less of my point. My point is more that you want to have a group that everyone's not the same. You want to have incredible diversity. They're looking for that, so that you are exposed to different things and different ideas. And
sure, but why should that come? Why should that come at the cost of somebody else's admissions just because of their race?
So here's the thing. So
colleges shouldn't be.
The notion that affirmative action can completely disqualify someone is just straight wrong. If you're out there curing cancer, it doesn't matter what race you are. Harvard's going to let you in. Okay. And the notion
but not everyone's curing
one
cancer.
factor, and that just because you're white or you're Asian or you're black or you're Hispanic, that you're never going to get into college is not true. On a specific basis, it may play a factor, but I'm sorry that if you're not getting into Dartmouth because a kid from an inner city who didn't have the same opportunity that you did, who's a genius, is getting in. I'm sorry, I'm not sympathetic to that.
Right, but some of these kids who are coming from the inner city, if you look at the dropout rates for affirmative action by race, it reflects, okay. So studies have found that in 2009, there was a Princeton study that showed that Asian Americans were having over 100 points taken away, same with white people, while black students were having over 100 points added to their application in the SAT. Why is that fair?
Yeah. So actually, you actually raise a very good point, to which I would have to offer a rebuttal. It's that I don't think it's possible to put a number value on someone's application. I don't think it's possible to say, "Ooh, Eric over there gets an 87 and I get a 63, and Arjun, you're a 94, and Aja's a 78. I have no idea."
But some schools do that. Phillips Academy, they use a 6-point rating system for their admissions. You can get 1 or 6.
First off. Andover, it's not definitive. They don't go, all right, I'm going to rate everyone in a point.
They do.
And then we're going to go from the top to the bottom. That's not how it works.
Yeah, but they do rate everyone.
Okay.
And neither do colleges. They don't go from top to bottom, but they still do. They add a numerical factor into people's admissions.
Yeah, I just think it's impossible. Like, so say this, right? You, Arjun, have cured cancer. Okay?
Yeah.
I'm Tom Brady. Okay? I'm the best football player ever, which I am.
Yeah.
But anyway, how do you compare me versus you? The school might want to boost their football program, or I am the greatest oboe player ever. Greatest oboe player. How do I compare to the greatest mathematician ever or the greatest flute player ever? It's impossible to give a number rating to it. It's just not.
Right.
It's not how it works.
But they're gonna choose me ahead of you because you're a better oboe, because the school needs football more than it needs a cure to cancer, not because you're white and I'm brown.
All right, look, I think
in that case, the admission was the right decision, right?
Correct.
It was because the person added a value that wasn't going to hurt somebody else. It wasn't a race-based admission.
I think the problem here is like we're talking about like how like privilege and everything, but affirmative action based on race isn't going to help all poor people because poor people are the people who have the least opportunity. So instead of basing it on race, we should maybe base it on income or like how literally like the hurdles you pass to
Yeah.
get to where you are, right? Because let's say, for instance, this happens, right? 1/5 one of 5 people who live in Chinatown, so basically Chinese people in like New York City, basically, are under the poverty line. Why should like LeBron James' son have an advantage over them? It should like race shouldn't be the deciding factor of how much
Yeah.
opportunity you have.
So
because
as I was saying to Arjun, I think that there's tons of factors that go into it, and income is definitely one of them. And then the thing we always need to remember about affirmative action is that people use the name affirmative action to represent a lot more than what affirmative action really is. And
Does
also,
affirmative action take income into account?
yes,
Do you
I
know
think
that?
I think that the way you think about affirmative action, again, I don't think it has a definitive meaning. Well, in the past, it had a definitive meaning. When the time it was created, the country was a lot different than it was right now,
Sure.
right?
I think
Um,
affirmative action should. The problem with I think it should be applied in specific cases. It shouldn't be something that should be used to blanket a whole group of people because of the color of their skin. If there's someone, affirmative action should not be applied to a pool of applicants because of their skin color. It should be applied on a candidate by candidate basis to see if it applies properly.
based on
And
opportunity and like where they
so
started.
how is it? Can I ask a question?
sure,
What is it? Is it a blanket right now?
I think it is. I mean,
if implemented.
those statistics about the population versus the percent of Ivy League. I mean, is that really accurate? Because then you have to look at where the applicants are coming.
It is accurate.
It is accurate, but you have to look at is that a relevant number? Because there's some states like Wyoming, for example, makes up 1% of the population, but I'm sure there's not that many applicants to Harvard from Wyoming. So I mean, I don't think a college is ever going to get to a point fairly where it represents the entire population of the United States, and that's not the job of a college.
Are you so you're
you saying-
advocating?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so you're advocating for admissions to be based off of merit.
Yes, I think if people are, yeah,
And is that pure merit or merit being a factor? So here's a going, right? I grew up, say for sake of argument, student A grew up in Harlem under a single mother in the inner city school. He scores a 1590 on your SAT. Student B lives in Princeton, went to PES his whole life, and scored a 1590 on the SAT.
Yeah.
Student A is Hispanic. Student B is Asian or white.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Which student would you choose?
Well, a test score isn't the only factor of merit. Merit will also be transcript.
For sake of argument, say it is.
The exact same transcript.
So just to further it, student B right here, the guy who was at went to PDS his whole life, 1600. This kid 1590.
If he has a higher test score, then I'd let him in. Unless, I mean, in the interviews, he bombs the interviews. Unless he
so for sake of argument, we're assuming that we can assign a numerical value to someone's application. Again, I don't think it's truly fair and impossible, but for the sake of the argument, it makes sense. If someone has a slightly better score, slightly worse score than another one, but the circumstances to which they arrived at that score were much more difficult based off of their circumstances, wouldn't the school want one kid instead of the other?
Yeah, and it should be based on the circumstance, not your race, right? The Hispanic kid isn't poor because he's Hispanic. It's because he's poor. And so you have to help poor people instead of only Hispanic people.
Exactly.
Like, the ideology is right, but you're really generalizing, and it's kind of hurtful for like all the other people in poverty.
Financial.
I don't understand why. I don't think the notion that is so hurtful to a race is true, because as I said, white people make up a higher percentage of Ivy Leagues than they do of America, and Asian people make up 10 times more of Ivy Leagues than they do of America. So there's not like, oh, they're being oppressed. That's not what's going on, right? And
but
on a case-by-case basis, it might make sense to want to have a student body that's more reflective of America and the world.
Is that the job of a college, though?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because the college wants to build a diverse body. And by the way,
But
I'm of
what
the
if,
opinion that the colleges should not be able to, the Harvard and Yale and private colleges should be able to admit whoever they want. It shouldn't be the government's job to tell them. On the outskirts of that, if they let in only African American people or only white people, then the government might want to intervene. But on the edges of it, I think the government should stay out of that. And I thought the DOJ thing was a little bit silly.
okay.
I
Well-
mean, what do you guys think of legacy and like getting into colleges based off of your parents?
I don't think that's
Because
fair.
I
don't
just
think
pulled
that's
up
fair.
a statistic that said that 14% of Ivy League students are legacy. And I think that in itself is inherently classist and maybe a little racist because most people in this country don't have had immigrant parents or had parents who were poor or didn't go to college.
Yeah, so I think
So like
that
I think a
I
lot
think-
of the college system is inherently either racist or classist.
So I think that the notion that legacies are racist is wrong. I think that's wrong.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily racist. I think
Because
it's more
again, if you want to look
classist.
at a percentage basis, white people make up probably the majority of legacies, right? But in 20 years, Asian people are going to make up 10 times more of legacies than they do in the population. So I don't think it's racist, right? I don't
mean,
think it's racist.
Yeah, I don't think racist is the right word, but I think it would say be more classist.
Classist might be a little bit more accurate, but the thing we need to keep in mind is that colleges don't make money. They're not good businesses.
They get
right?
donations.
So they need some way to boost revenue, and especially schools like Harvard and Yale that don't get government money. So I understand why legacies are omitted, and I think that it's once again it's the school's decision, and we should have no place to tell them like, oh, Harvard, Yale, the government's going to step in and tell you which students you're allowed to omit. The only place where the government really should be able to do that is the Naval Academy, West Point, and the Air Force. So,
Like on the same point, like, ACA 5, the government shouldn't, oh wait, that's public schools, but like I feel like the government shouldn't enforce like, hey, you have to like not allow this amount of Asian Americans or whites or like something like that. Because
as I said, I think it should be the schools to other than around the edges. There's like tail risk, right?
yeah, if there's like 95%
other than the
white
tail,
students,
it
like,
should be the school's decision. Anybody got anything? Arjun, so do you have any questions? I know I was talking for a while, and I think that I might have cut you off at some point. I think that you don't agree with me, so go ahead.
No, I think the main thing that we did disagree on is whether putting someone's race in factor is the right thing to do. And I think there's a lot of statistics we could keep bringing up, but in the end, I don't think we're gonna end up agreeing with one another.
I agree with it. I think that at this point it might make sense to agree to disagree.
Yeah.
All right. I think that we might want to start wrapping it up because it's been an hour.
yeah, I just want to make a point. Like, it's kind of like what we said about equality of like input and like output, right? You should have like a level playing field. So like instead of, and I could see why like affirmative action tries to level it, but it doesn't really do a great job because there's still going to be others, I guess, who have like benefit way more from it than, some people. So I think instead of like doing it by race, like I said before, maybe about like income, or maybe you try to boost these communities of color, or try to help these communities outside of school so that, you maybe boost public education so that people get more chances and it's more fair because, it's about opportunity, not about the final thing where you have to make sure that everyone is the same.
Yeah, I think that
we could agree a little bit more if we think the phrase affirmative action, as I said, has been used to represent both a lot more and a lot less than what it really means. So I think the question really boils down to is, should race and income and the circumstances to which you went through during your life be a factor in college admissions? Should those three collectively play any factor, or should a specific one play a factor? I think that's what it really comes down to.
Yeah.
I think there's no like real right answer because it's about values, right? Like, should they get in because they work hard, or should they get in because they're inherently like at an advantage? And like probably for schools, they might favor people who just are better just because they want to educate more successful students or something like that, right? And so it's a really moral argument because like there's no exact right or wrong. You have to see like what you value, right? Do you value forced diversification? Do you value like
I mean,
complete?
forced diversification isn't so there. Affirmative action is tricky because you can't set a quota. It's illegal to set a quota on the number of students of a certain race, but it can play a role in whether they're admitted.
Yeah. So and I don't think that's a bad thing at all.
Yeah.
Meaning, like, would you be comfortable? And again, this is a hypothetical. Say, for sake of argument, I have no idea how many kids are in Harvard. Say 5,000 or 1,000 in the freshman class. That's not right, but
Sure. No,
say
but yeah.
the most qualified 1,000 people were all white people.
But that wouldn't
Would you be
happen.
comfortable with them admitting only white people
But that wouldn't happen
if they
we
were the
could.
most qualified? For the sake of argument, would that be something you were comfortable with?
I think that admitting only.
Can someone just let's go around. Eric, what do you, yay or nay?
I mean,
I think that's a no. I can see the
it's a
head.
tricky situation because like
Bingo.
it's really
Arjun?
hypothetical.
Nay, race shouldn't be a factor in admissions.
So you think then
would
you would
be
be perfectly comfortable in that situation with Harvard admitting only white people?
If they were merit, if by merit, meaning they had the test scores, the GPA, did good in the interviews, sure.
Okay. Well, then your point is coherent. Then I understand what you're saying. Aja?
I would not be comfortable with Harvard admitting only white people because just based off of merit. I think that the white people would mostly be admitted because they have more opportunities than other people.
Bingo.
People of color.
And by the way, in that scenario, it could also be all Asian people or all Hispanic people. I was just throwing out an example that I know I could.
But here's the thing. I would personally be comfortable attending Harvard if there were like everyone was a different race than me, right? I feel like that would, because like if you say you wouldn't be comfortable, you're kind of like saying, I don't know. I feel like it doesn't really matter.
Here's the thing. I don't think Harvard will ever have an all-white class because you have to remember sometimes a black person doesn't get in because of affirmative action. There will always be black people or Asian people or Hispanic people or people of a minority that will have higher scores than other white people. So I don't think it's possible for Harvard to have an entirely white class.
Yeah. So again, my point was less of that it was an example that was going to happen. It was more of a just like, how would you feel about it? Because I know.
And the affirmative action bans in California, for example, have shown to lower and hurt the admission of African Americans and Hispanics into schools. But the reason for that, the argument really is that a good thing or not a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Should that be changed?
And also, it's about opportunity, right? Schools are supposed to give an opportunity. But like there was a study with affirmative action and without, the same number of students of color graduated, which means that if you put in affirmative action, some of the less qualified students, they physically can't make it and they drop out.
Okay, so, I think we're done with affirmative action, but I think we don't want to pass the time limit so we can still upload this. But thank you so much, Adia, for coming on. I really enjoyed the discussion today.
Yeah, a lot of you put forward some great points.
Yeah, right. Make sure to visit our channel at Breaking It Down for You. We'll put that in the link. All right. Okay. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.